you have any idea who I am? Why I asked you to come here today?
No.
I wanted to speak with you about your future. What do you hope to achieve, Mark?
I want to be the best in the world.
I am a patriot. I want to see this country soar again. Coach is a father. Coach is a mentor. Coach has great power on an athlete's life. We're going to do great things, Mark.
I'm going to give you everything I have.
Over here, please. Everybody right down the middle, all eyes, please. Thank you.
To the right, please.
Oh, okay.
Walk to the right.
Hey, Mark, over here, please. Mark? All the way to the end, please, guys. Mark, can you look here, please? Mark? Counting all the way to the end, please.
Bennett, to the right. Mrs. Redbridge, to the right, please.
Oh, you. We get to freak out.
I want to thank Toronto for raising me to love movies.
Everyone has a big imagination. All of us do.
This is exciting. My first film to premiere here at the Toronto Film Festival. It's an exciting night.
You are the most globally exciting festival in the world.
Hello and welcome to the press conference for Foxcatcher. A few points before we begin. This press conference will be streamed live at www.tiff.net, and still photographs will be made available on the TIFF Media site. Volunteers with microphones are in the audience to assist you with your questions. Please remember to identify yourself and your media outlet. Please note, no photography is permitted during this press conference. Only those pre-approved wire services may take photographs, and we ask that you do so from behind the first row. If you could take a moment to turn your cell phones to silent. Our moderator for today is Eric Kohenik, and it is now my pleasure to welcome the director and cast for Foxcatcher.
Good morning. Welcome to the press conference for Foxcatcher. My name is Eric Kohanek. I'm your moderator today. With us today, seated next to me, we have Bennett Miller, who directed the film. Next to Bennett, we have Channing Tatum, who plays the role of Mark Schultz in the movie. Next to Channing, we have Mark Ruffalo, who plays the part of Mark Schultz's brother, Dave. Next to Mark, we have Vanessa Redgrave, who takes on the role of Jean DuPont, the mother of millionaire John DuPont. And last, but certainly not least, we have Steve Carell, who takes on the core role of John DuPont. If you have any questions, please raise your hands. We've got microphones. We'll get them to you. And I'll start it off by asking you, Bennett, how you got the project together and what interested you about the story to begin with?
Well, I was at an event and a complete stranger approached me with an envelope with newspaper clippings about this story. And, you know, a month or two later I was throwing stuff out and I just happened to open it and read the first article. And, you know, something about the absurdity of an extremely one of the wealthiest men in America, making a decision to become a wrestling coach to some of the most talented wrestlers in America without knowing anything about wrestling. and it just seemed comic and horrible because of what happened. And what do these people have to do with each other? And how do they fit? And, you know, I'm trying to give you some kind of a reasonable answer, but the truth is it just, you know, seized me. And for whatever reason, in that moment, you know, there was a vision, and didn't let go of it.
As you were putting this together and assembling the cast, I know you've been quoted in a couple of sources as saying you were looking to cast the role of John DuPont and give it to someone who would be totally unexpected to be in that role, totally different. Can you talk a bit about what made you choose Steve?
Well, Steve's agent put Steve's name forward in a time when lists were being made. And I think seeing his name got me thinking like that this is a character who does something that nobody expects. And Steve, at least our perception of Steve as a performer and whatever we might know of his, you know, public persona, is very much not what you would think of when it comes to what this character does, which is the same as with John DuPont himself. Nobody thought of John this way. And when I met with Steve, I had the thought, and Steve, you tell me if this is a bothersome thought, if I should stop saying things like this.
If you think it's bothersome, it probably is.
Steve is not as intelligent as people think he is, and doesn't really have much talent. But no, what
I didn't think that was that bad.
what I really wanted to say that's really bothersome is I am attracted to comic actors. I think that there's a history of comic actors being amazing in dramatic roles, and knowing a few comedian types, there's always a very sharp aspect to their troubled psyches that the world never really or rarely gets to see. And when we sat and talked about it the first time, there was nothing familiar in the way that you presented yourself and the role, and how you talked about it right out of the gate, and a willingness to exhibit these qualities that this character had, and it's the seriousness and the commitment that Steve had immediately, also went a long, long way, I thought.
Steve, maybe you can weigh in on that. How important is it to you to stretch and branch out to new and completely different roles from what people might expect?
It's, excuse me, it's not important in terms of proving anything to anyone. I didn't take the part in order to show that there was a side of me or an ability to do something. I was just intrigued by the story and the thought of working with Bennett. But it is exciting to take on things that aren't necessarily in your wheelhouse or hadn't been, things that you had explored before. And that's what it was, I think, for all of us. It was a real exploration, and Bennett allowed for that too. He really fostered that feeling that we had the freedom to fail and try anything, and that he would catch us if we went astray.
We have a question over here.
Mario Sekeli from Mexico City. I have a question for the cast, and before that, I'm still scared about your character, Steve Carell. We just saw the movie like an hour ago, and it's very impressive. Can you talk about the undertones about, because as a foreigner journalist, we see the critique or the comment about this patriotism, America, USA, and can you comment about it? Because I remember a little bit about this American tragedy film with Elizabeth Taylor and this kind of subjects that are very powerful. No?
Well, that, if I'm not mistaken, was directed towards the cast.
Channing? Steve?
Are you really asking me to answer that? I mean, that's a huge question. I don't quite know how to. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Of the dark side of patriotism? Yes. I would say that there's probably, if you choose to look at it, some allegory to that aspect of the film and what happens to that sort of ethic or ideology in America. And it's one that puts certain values above the values of just people, or an ideology above certain values of the value of a human being. So yes, I agree. I think that there is something there that if you choose to look at is very much in this movie.
Just sort of picking up from that, Steve, how familiar were you with the story of John DuPont before?
At the time, I remember reading about it and seeing the story on television, but then it was gone pretty much the next day or the next week, so I never knew anything more about it until I spoke with Bennett and read the script and got to, understand the scope of it.
And what were some of the things that really sort of blew you away about the psyche of this man? And
well, the whole thing seems to me to be a Greek tragedy. It's painfully sad, and I really think for all the characters, it's not, there's a cloud that looms over the story and over these characters and over their relationships throughout. And as I've described it before, I feel like you never, you don't know that it's leading to what it inevitably leads to. And you don't expect it to happen, but at the same time, you're not surprised that it happened in the end.
all right. We have a question in the second row here, and then down front. Oh.
CTV.ca. Steve, I wanted to ask you about the transformation that you went through, not just physically, but mentally, to play such a dark character.
Well, physically, I watched a lot of tape on DuPont. He had commissioned a documentary on himself, and that was a great source of information about him. Not only what he wanted to project publicly, but there was raw footage in between takes where he's talking to the camera crew and to the documentarian, and it's a completely different side of him than the one he's projecting for the actual documentary. So I thought that was insightful, and he wrote many things. So there was a lot of material to sift through and to watch him, to watch his physicality, how he presented himself, and I think that helped the internal as well. And speaking to people like John Gira, who was his best friend, who was essentially a consultant all the way through the film, and worked with Channing and Mark with the wrestling. It's people like that who knew him were a great help to gain insight as to what made him tick. And again, it's my estimation as to who he was. I don't want to be too cavalier about that.
Back here and then up here. Okay, go ahead.
Thanks. Liz Braun, Sun Media. I have a question for Bennett Miller. Part A, did you have much cooperation from the DuPont family or any interference? Excuse me. And part B, did Mark Schultz say whether or not Mr. DuPont was a sexual predator? Because there's that homoerotic level in the film, but I don't know if that's storytelling or reality or where that came from.
Well, in regards to the DuPont family, we had a little bit of contact, just a little bit of contact, mostly, you know, generous. I mean, again, it was just a little bit, but it was they were generous. I had one conversation with a lawyer who was not so generous, but also not obstructive at all, and not threatening. And as far as, you know, the second question, predator, no, but the undercurrents of the sexuality, you know, of this, you know, of this whole venture for DuPont is something that people can speculate on looking back, but I think it was a complex thing that never became explicit, but I think charged the atmosphere with a certain feeling.
That's exactly how it comes across in the film.
Yeah.
Another question over here.
Hello, Carlos Garcia from Mexico. This is a question for the whole cast. We see the effort and all the work that the Olympic champions and the sportsmen, they do to get an award, a medal. Is there someone that you admire more than for the achievements, for the kind of life that they have, like I don't know, an Olympic champion or people from sports?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, they've devoted their life to be the greatest in the world, some of the best years of their life. I mean, I think that's absolutely something to admire. But you know, I don't think anyone more than the other. I think they've all made their commitment. I don't have one specific.
Yes, they're all admirable. As far as, you know, this film is concerned, these guys were a huge influence, obviously, and their particular struggles to get recognized as athletes, to even qualify for the Olympics, are monumental, and their commitment to what they set out to do, the very humble way they lived their lives, because there was no endorsements. It's not like today. There was no money, no endorsements. It was very slim pickings, very hard life to live, all purely for a sport that, for the most part, has very little following other than a very committed group of fans. And so there's something incredibly admirable that I found in the life that these guys were living to manifest what they believed to be their highest potentiality.
I think unusual. Like this sport, more than any other I know, it's done for the intrinsic value and not some kind of extrinsic reward. You know, Vanessa, do you have a favorite wrestler? George the Animal Steel. Moving on.
We have a question down front here if we can get a mic. In the meantime, Ms. Redgrave, I wonder if you could talk a bit about your character, Jean DuPont. She's not in the film a whole lot, but there's a great amount of intensity that comes out right away that we see in the relationship between her and her son. Can you talk a bit about preparing for the role? And
I'd rather ask Bennett to talk about my character.
Mark Ruffalo, can you talk about her character, please? Well, this is difficult to say with Vanessa sitting right there, but you know, having researched it a bit and spoken to quite a few people, and even seen some evidence in film that was shot down on the farm that featured Jean DuPont watching John DuPont attempt to compete in a heartbreaking way. The film wanted, in the story the actual story, I believe, had at its center a formidable woman who comes from a horribly impressive lineage and can be condemning, and who had an example that her son could never live up to, and whose gaze could castrate. And there's really only one name on that list, and that was...
And how did that make you feel?
Well,
I just said, be yourself, Vanessa, and...
That's brilliant, thank you. No, obviously I didn't want to run away, but in this film I was trying to perceive and apprehend through Bennett who this lady was, and he had to find her and I had to find her through him, which is what should happen for an actor or actress in most films, but it doesn't often happen that way. And for me, that was the best way.
Jean Dupont was a world-class equestrian, and there was some parallel between John Dupont collecting his wrestlers and she with her horses. And she was concerned about these wrestlers living on the estate, and she knew that she wasn't going to be around for that much longer. And she was concerned for her son and what might become of him, and what kind of designs might these wrestlers have on him. And she was anxious about what he was getting caught up in, and just I think she tried but could not abide, by what he valued, the means he sought validation. Heartbreaking.
Question down front.
Hi, I'm Michael from TNT Latin America. My question is for Steve, but also for Mark and Channing as well. The physical transformation, just getting back to that a second, with the prosthesis and all of that, do you find that more of a tool in portraying a character like this, or is it something that you kind of have to separate yourself from and kind of push through as an actor?
I never felt, well, Bill Corso designed the look of DuPont, and it was several months in the making. He's really an artist, and he approached it with the same seriousness and depth that I think everyone did. And so many tests and options, and the goal was to have it be seamless and not anything that I had to act through, and that was just a part of the character and who he is. In terms of the nuts and bolts, I would be there 3 hours, generally 3 hours before everyone else. So by the time everyone else got to set, I was already looking different. And I think that was a help, because it tended to separate me from everyone else, because frankly I was off-putting. I wasn't somebody that you'd want to hang around with. And I think sort of inadvertently that helped remove me and put me in a little bubble on the side. So I think it was beneficial, but I never felt like I was pushing through it.
I think it's interesting that you and Channing never really had a conversation or got to know each other until the Cannes Film Festival.
No, and he's a really nice guy.
That's true.
Yeah.
Channing, could you talk a bit about the transformation, the psychological transformation that Mark goes through, and your preparation for that? And there are some very intense moments that you go through during the film. Can you talk a bit about that?
I have the unique, I guess, ability in this movie to actually know my character. I got to spend a good amount of time with him, and also people that knew him very intimately. I think DuPont came into Mark's life at a very interesting time. And really, I think, for one of the first times, shined light on him and made him feel seen and I guess loved in a way, you know, and brought him out of his of the shadow of his brother, I guess. And I don't know, the emotional part of Mark, he's I kind of describe it as you know, when you have a fever, like you're just really raw, like little things sort of just, he's constantly sort of in this excruciating negotiation with the world. And I got into that, I guess, just through Mark's physicality. Wrestlers in general are super physical people, and their language is movement and the way that they I guess interact with people through contact. And I think that was my way into Mark, just studying the way he held his fork. You know, he didn't hold it like normal people or refined people. He just grabbed it and started shoveling, you know, food into his mouth, and it was just a very just raw. Like he was just it was almost animalistic. I don't mean animal as in like simple, and just mean get the job done, sort of type of a feeling. And so yeah, that's how I kind of got into Mark.
Question down here and then over there.
Virtual TV of Toronto. This question is for Vanessa. Share with us your experience working with these three actors on the stage, please. Thank you.
Well, I was very, very excited and very in awe of all three actors and of Bennett. It was one of the most unique, actually a totally unique experience, which I am extremely happy to have had. No. Thank you.
Oh.
Since I know you were in the Pittsburgh area, is there anything in particular that stands out from your time in Western Pennsylvania?
Cold. Very cold.
I'm going to say the Warhol Museum, which was my refuge.
The bridges and those incredible rivers and the sort of decaying grandeur of this magnificently striving city was pretty impressive.
It's really hard to get around. Like there's no like understandable grid, or I mean everything is sort of in and around these rivers and hills, and it's very disorienting, and everything feels sort of unto itself, and each neighborhood is kind of its own thing, and I don't know. It was unlike any other real city I think I've been to in America. It was really, really unique and cold, very cold.
Question back there and then up here. Go ahead.
Hi, Kerry Roberts from The Next Take on Super Channel. My question's for Steve and Channing. I'd like to ask about your own experiences with coaching. I know, Steve, that you did some hockey and lacrosse back east. Obviously, John DuPont's an extreme, but did you ever have experiences with coaches where there was a little bit of that over-intensity in a lot of ways?
I remember I was playing, I was a goalie, and I was playing on a good team, and remember the coach was demonstrating how to do a slap shot, and he was a big guy, and he pinned me in the shoulder, and I had to kind of go off to the side for a few minutes, and he was kind of the suck it up, you know, come on, Carell, get back in there, and so I did. But then at the next game, when we were getting changed and the coach came in the locker room, I had a bruise that extended from like behind my shoulder, like it was probably this big, and he had no idea. And I saw just a tiny bit of remorse in his face, but that's the only time I ever saw it, was when he actually had seen what he had done. But for him, it was that. It was all about winning. Second place really was irrelevant.
Channing?
I've played organized sports a lot. I played football for 10 years, baseball and mixed martial arts as well. But I think I respond really well to that. I think I did. I don't know. I probably was the best that I was when I had someone just grinding me, and that wouldn't even let me have a breath. I don't know. I really respond to that sort of masochistic sort of coaching in a way. I think my dad was very like that. Yeah, he very masochistic coach.
No, I'm a sadist. You're the masochist.
Okay, copy. Sorry. I don't know. I don't think it's for everyone.
I'm not a sadist.
I don't know if that's true.
I'm also a masochist.
I don't think everyone's like that. Obviously, I think a great coach knows who his player and who his athlete is and how to get the best out of him. But I think I was definitely someone that the more you got in his face and challenged him, is the harder I pushed back.
Question down here.
Everyone, Barbara Dudinska, Slovak News Agency. I have a question for Channing and Mark. I think a lot of people have a certain perception about Steve and the roles he was playing. I'm sure that will change after people will see this movie. It was incredible. Did you learn something about him, not his role, but him, while doing the movie? Thank you very much. Something that you didn't know before.
About Steve?
Yes.
I'm as curious about this as you are.
Can I say that I saw Jon Stewart the other night because he's up here, and he saw the film in Telluride and said that he always suspected that Steve Carell was evil, but now he's got proof.
I can't like pretend to know a lot about Steve, and I don't want to act like you know someone from their movies, because I think you can't. You can get maybe some sense that maybe some sense about the person, but I don't want to pretend that I had some grand idea of who Steve was, that I learned something specific, but I learned he is a tremendous person, and his commitment to what he does is almost unsurpassed. I remember coming out of scenes and just being like, I don't know how he's staying in like the maze of what we were doing, and just never saying like I need a minute to like gather my thoughts or himself, and it was just I don't know, it was something great for a young actor to see, like just a master class.
We have a question in the back there.
Here, Heather Seaman from Rogers TV. Steve, we know you from your more comedic roles. I'm wondering, is it more difficult to get into the dramatic roles, or how do you find the difference between doing comedy and more dramatic, serious characters?
It's more closely aligned than you'd think. I think I approach it the same way. You first look at the character and the relationships and try to ground it. I think, to me, comedy is funnier when there's some sort of tether to reality, and I think the same goes for something that is more dramatic in nature, obviously. But I don't think one is harder or easier than the other. I think they're different, but I think the approach is pretty similar. I don't know if that answers your question. Sort of vague. Sorry.
Bennett, I wonder if you can talk a bit about piecing the look of the film together and the sound of it, because there were tremendous bursts of silence throughout the film, which sort of led to the ominous nature of the whole story. Can you talk about structuring that?
Well, I mean, it's a film that doesn't tell a story. It's a film that observes a story, and I think that the style of the film is designed to sensitize you to the undercurrents of what's happening. That which is not being said, So there's an austerity to it, in all, from the production design to how the camera moves to the lensing to, you know, the metric of, like, the music of in the meter of the, you know, silences and what's said, and it's all really meant to be a confrontation with the things that we might ordinarily, especially in film, might ordinarily be insensitive to, because, you know, where this film works, I think, is in these undercurrents, and so it tries to put you on it, you know, under the spotlight, in the lens, unflinching.
So that was always your intent when you were piecing together what it would look like. That was the
Yeah.
intention going in.
Yeah, I mean, those are governing principles, and then how does that manifest, and what color palette is going to work for that?
Right.
And, you know, what is the color of seduction in this case, or the color of corruption in this case, and what is it? You know, what is the atmosphere for redemption? You know, that occurs in the, you know, the mundane and almost, you know, banal hotel room in Pensacola when Dave comes in and smacks Mark and, you know, recommunes with him. How do you light for that? And it's almost always, it just comes back to, you know, what's happening, and what's happening beneath what's happening, and how do we sensitize to that, and how do we, you know, how do we bring you in to feel with these guys?
I'd like to add one bit of information about Bennett. Is he comes from a particular tradition of meditation that they will sit for 5, 6, 7, 8, 12, 15 days in silence meditating. And that form of meditation, the people that I know have done it, it's very confrontational to the person sitting. And I always feel the nature of this film is this meditation that is very quiet, very steady, very honest, and objective, but also confronting. And what I know of you, and I know of that meditation method, and I know the silence in this film, I think that's important for people to know. It's Vipassana, and it's something that I think Bennett, it gives him a singular kind of point of view that no other filmmaker has, and I think it comes particularly from that discipline. Sorry. Thank you.
And Steve, some of those moments of silence are obviously when there's a lot going on in his mind as he's contemplating things. And yet, there were some tremendous comical moments that came out of those sounds. Can you talk a bit about, you know, exploring the intensity of him and then sort of coming out with something comedic, yet something that doesn't look like a caricature?
I never thought about any of the moments as being more particularly intense than any others. I think it was just you know, people just live. They don't know whether they're in a comedy or a drama. Characters just are, and so there was no delineation in my mind between moments that might potentially be comedic or dramatic. And frankly, it was a surprise when I watched it for the first time with an audience, just what parts garnered laughter and what didn't. I mean, there were scenes, none that I'll talk about specifically, but there were scenes that Bennett and I thought were hilarious when we were discussing them in the darkest, most absurd way, that don't elicit any laughter in the screening of the movie. But there are other moments that I think are the most heartbreaking that do. So I think it's just a matter of perception. But yeah, I sort of approached it all in the same way.
We have time for only a couple more questions. One down here. Wait for the mic there. Yeah.
Can you talk, Channing and Mark, about the relationship that you built in the screen, the brotherhood, because it seems very real and it seems like you know each other since years ago?
For one, it's very, very easy to be hugged by Mark. He's very, very lovable. And you just feel safe. Thank you. That being said, there is also, he is a very fierce person when he wants to be. And that also makes you feel protected when you're, within his protection, I guess. But wrestling with him for 7 months, essentially, by the end of this film, you create a relationship kind of like no other relationship can be without having that sort of experience together. There's a suffering and a learning and a humbling aspect to it, and I truly, obviously Bennett held my hand all the way through this thing, but I can honestly say I would not have been able to survive this movie without Mark. It was a mountain of an experience, and I just, I've never had a brother, but I have an older sister that is very, she takes care of me, and he's probably the closest person that I've ever met to match that energy.
And I feel the same about Channing, and there is nobody more loyal and more committed that I could have thought of to have gone through this journey with. I lost my brother early, and so it was a nice momentary stand-in while I shot this film with him. And we went through a lot, and it was very confronting. And the training that we went through was particularly tough. And Bennett is a director that insists that you're not hiding behind anything. There's no comfort zone, and a lot of actors say I like not to be comfortable, but then there's nobody likes not being comfortable, and so that was also tough, and so we really relied on each other quite a bit, and then we were informed by this incredible complex relationship between Mark and Dave that started when they were very young. Their parents didn't create a place for them where they had felt safe, and so they had to make that for themselves, and that became our journey as well. But I love Channing, and I'm honored to have gone through this with him.
Can I add one little thing about
Sure.
all that? They did train together for 7 months or something on the wrestling, and we shot that scene where they kind of warm up together, and then it becomes a little violent, and Mark breaks Dave's nose. When I got to the edit and was able to really sift through that and put a version together, I realized there's about 25 minutes of scenes from the first act that I could just cut, because they had all been designed to communicate what the nature of this relationship was. And I watched that and realized it's without saying a word, you get it. Like you see who these people are to each other. And shooting that scene was really more like shooting a documentary. I mean, they just brought it. No one had designed. I mean, I hadn't designed that they're going to warm up together, and then let's just show me what this is. They had worked out some choreography about how the broken nose happens and how it would work, but it really was like shooting a documentary, and just what was there, what was in the footage. I just eliminated days of work.
and you have to understand how unbelievably concerning it is to lose 25 minutes of stuff that you after you start. He started that after I saw that cut, or as I was seeing that cut, I was like, wait a minute, where's the other like 7 scenes that we've had together? And then once you see this, by the end of the scene, you realize that you don't need any of it. That scene tells every single thing.
It's just in there.
Yeah.
It's just in there, and that was just these 2 guys, and I think it's who they. By the time we shot that, it's who they were to each other, and it was just in there.
Just following up, Mark, how familiar were you with the story of Dave? And I know that Channing got to talk to Mark Schultz, but how did you sort of get inside your character?
Well, I knew the story. I was a wrestler in high school, and so I knew who these people were. And I heard a little bit about it when it happened, but it sort of disappeared quickly after that. So most of my, what I learned about it happened while we were shooting, or those 7 months preparing. And I would say a great deal of it was John Gira, who came on as just a friend of the project, who ended up joining us in our training, who ended up then choreographing a lot of the wrestling scenes, and who quite rightfully was brought on as a producer in honor of his incredible contribution to this film. He was Dave Schultz's best friend. He lived on the farm with him. He was a wrestler with him. He was there the day that John was shot. And he was invaluable to me about who Dave was, what he was like, how he moved, how he wrestled, how he was when he wasn't wrestling. And then I have to say, Nancy Schultz, Dave's wife, and her kids, Xander and Danielle, and Danny, all were part of this thing from the very beginning. They visited us while we were on set. And one of the most remarkable things about this whole process was all of Dave's friends are in the movie. They were there while we were shooting. They would show up. It was this incredibly open communication and dialogue with Dave and Mark's past that Bennett insisted happened and managed, and had the great faith that all of these people who had legacies to protect came in and participated in a particularly difficult story. And so that was remarkable. I don't know many directors who would do such a thing, but it also really gave us an understanding of these people that I don't think, there's no way I possibly could have come anywhere near what we had done without these people's help, honestly.
Can I say one more thing about that? First of all, I couldn't insist that these people be around, because I mean, it was more like, we opened it and they showed up, and they were, I mean, it was their generosity. But one other thing that was incredibly affecting to me, and I just had to see it, was that Mark showed up one day when, in the weeks before we began shooting, when we were rehearsing, and he had Dave Schultz's glasses, and his actual glasses, and he said that Nancy Schultz had given him.
That was a big
It was
deal.
just, I mean, just wearing, it's as though he's wearing Dave's glasses. I mean, it sounds like a small thing, but it's sort of like Superman's cape. There's these magic powers, and like you put them on, and just to know that she had, that kind of was giving you and us the kind of trust, to offer something like that.
Okay. Foxcatcher is a TIFF Gala presentation. It will have its TIFF public premiere tonight at 6 o'clock at Roy Thompson Hall. There will be another public screening tomorrow at 12 noon at the Princess of Wales Theatre. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.